Hi, everyone. Rebecca Nelson, Wine Club Director here at Becker Vineyards once again. Thank you all so much for joining us. We're going to do another virtual tasting tonight. Again, this is our Mother's Day week. So we sent this package out so you can get it to your moms by Mother's Day. And then they have a whole week of fun with us doing these virtual tastings on the wines that you sent them. So I hope a lot of you not only gifted this to your moms, but you also got one for yourselves. So we're really excited for everybody joining us on this one tonight. We have, of course, again, our winemaker, Jon Leahy. We have our owner, Dr. Richard Becker. And we also have our general manager, Bret Perrenoud, tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to them. We're doing the 2016 Fleur Sauvage tonight. I hope you've got that one in your glass and you're ready to go. And I'll turn this right over to Jon. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers, Rebecca. Thank you for that wonderful intro, as always. So, Doc, why don't you lead us off with an intro and a couple of words, and we'll get into the wine.
A couple of words are, last week was Nurses Week in the United States. And an ad in the New York Times today said, this is the year of the nurse. This is the year in which every day, every week is Nurses Day, Nurses Week. The smiling courage, they never make enough money. They never get enough thanks. And they almost never complain. And they're a great gift to us on the planet. So Petra, Alma, Norma, Paula, Priscilla, Yoli, the wonderful women I work with every day, here's to you.
I'll drink that. And if you don't mind, I'm going to tag my sister Vivian and sister Sue, who are both nurses.
Wonderful. Yeah.
In their immortal words, if the bone's not sticking through, you're fine. Okay. I will jump right in here. And Bret is also joining us tonight because he is, in addition to the many hats that Mr. Perrenoud wears, one of them is grower relations. So of all the people in the winery, Bret's got the intimate knowledge, every grower, every vineyard. Pretty sure he's nicknamed every vine in every vineyard that he's walked over the last 15 plus years. So the Fleur Sauvage that we're drinking tonight is one of the very few sweet wines that we make here at Vineyards. And I know we are a classically dry wine house, but you know, every once in a while you do have to pick up a sweet wine. And I have actually not had this wine in forever until about an hour ago. So it's been at least 6 or 8 months since I've tasted it. So I'd like to jump right into it before we get into the vineyards and the grapes. I want you guys both to kind of interject. We'll start with you, Bret. What do you get with this wine when you're smelling and tasting?
Well, I think if I steal a little of your thunder about, I know it's already in it. So I mean, the varietals are going to come out, right? If this is mainly Roussanne, and you get those apricot notes, and I think that one of the stories that I'm going to tell is that how much we usually get in arguments over sweet wine at the winery. We typically don't argue very much when we're doing blends, but for whatever reason, when it comes to these off-dry wines, it usually becomes a little tensious in our tastings, you know. But I do think that the varietal is like really playing a big role in how these flavor notes are coming out in this particular one, you know.
I do too. I think it's wonderful. I'm getting a really good honeyed note. Doc, what are your thoughts on this wine initially when you smell it?
You know, I love, you know, the name means wildflowers, obviously, and we live in a world of wonderful wildflowers. We were inspired by John Thomas's planting at Wild Seed Farms, and he's been a friend. He plants poppies on our property that raises the viewing enormously. He's put fields of Indian blankets, of poppies, of red bluebonnets, Indian paintbrush. That's sort of what I think of. And what I really think of is the times that I've been in the Loire Valley and tasting their off-dry Chenin Blanc and Sauvignon Blanc, very much like this. And I got a telephone call from Tangi Patton one time saying, the aromatic of this wine, Doc, is really amazing. And that I said, Tangi, you made my day. But I love what you captured, Jon, and it's really good. Thank you.
Well, I you know, as a wine, it's a fun wine. Okay, you know, we can be very, very serious sometimes, and I think as an aside, in our industry, we get a little overly serious about wine on occasion. It's good that we do a fun wine, it's a picnic wine. It's a wine to have on the porch. It's a wine to have with spicy food. It's, you know, it's all of these things, but yes, it is a sweet wine. And if you're not a sweet wine drinker, do yourself a favor and have at least a part of a glass, a small glass, but enjoy it. But I get these, you know, being guilty of not being a sweet wine drinker all the time. I'm getting some great florals out of here. And what really has amazed me is in Texas, the absolute brilliant ripeness of the Viognier, the Roussanne. There's a little tiny bit of Semillon in here. There's a little amount of Sauvignon Blanc and some Chardonnay. I mean, it is predominantly Roussanne. But as you said, Bret, too, yeah, those floral and fruit notes, especially from the Roussanne, are coming through. But I'm getting a lot of honey on this. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah. I agree.
And I think one of the things that you alluded to about, like, I mean, we don't drink a lot of sweet wine in my house, but I think typically when we do enjoy a sweeter wine or an off-dry wine is when we're having one of our amazing 3 or 4 course or 5 course or 6 course dinners. And I always kind of have to remind myself, like, why am I not, you know, drinking this style of wine more? Mm-hmm. And again, we try not to make things taste like a, you know, like a popsicle or Kool-Aid or whatever. But I think that the balance with a little bit of sugar and a little bit of these notes is something that, you know, it really has its place when you're eating the final course of your 3-course meal or your 4-course meal. I think the problem is that we don't eat enough of those at home on a Wednesday night. You know, we're lucky enough to get to sit down and have as many 3 to 5 course dinners as what we get to have at the winery. But that's when these wines, to me, really kind of start to shine. And again, I think we also try to make wines that appeal to all of our customers that may come in or out. And if you know, I started drinking this wine when I started working at the winery because I really didn't drink wine. I started drinking like sweeter wines and kind of moved to the dry whites and then moved on to the dry reds. And I think I've had that conversation with at least 1,000 people that started down the road of their wine, you know, flight with trying sweet white wines or off dry white wines, you know?
Oh yeah. Well, and it is a natural progression. I mean, you know, if we're to make a generality, the general American palate tends to lean towards the sweet side of life. You know, but as wine drinkers, we've all developed, you know, through those stages where we are now enjoying the drier wines and for a lot of good reasons. But going back to this, I'm smelling this and I'm thinking, you know, this would go really, really well with sushi. And I don't know if you're a sushi fan or not. And if you are, I really think it would go well. But it also goes well with a sweet wine. You know, we don't always have a sweet Riesling around, but this would go really well with a spicy dish. You know, think Southeast Asian or think Tex-Mex. You know, the sweeter wines tend to curtail that heat in those dishes and really bring things out. But I want to get into the vineyards because this is a fascinating blend. And then Doc, also, before we jump into there, why did you choose the term Fleur Sauvage? Why not just say wildflower?
I don't have a decent answer to that. Well, I think we were having fun with, you know, we're trying to make, as you've heard me say, we're trying to make French wine in the German hill country of Texas with an Irish winemaker. So I needed to steer us back a little bit towards the French wine that we admire, that I admire. Right. So that was the idea. And, you know, Joe is fluent in French and I fake it pretty well. So, and anyway, I think it's loving French wine and French language and French culture.
But,
you know.
but John, people also don't know that almost every new wine that we make, we try to make it French. I mean, even the name of it, you know, so a lot of times we're sitting there trying to come up with a new name and you look at the names of the wines that we have at the winery and there's a substantial amount of French influence in those names. You know?
I think it may be somebody in the winery is a big Francophile. I'm not sure though.
If only we could have Oncle du Calmar, we'd be ahead of the game.
No.
Thank God Bunny said no to that one.
Right.
I think she actually said, Richard, we're not calling it that. We're going to.
It's true.
I absolutely love it. So the first vineyard, of course, the Bingham Vineyard, who we had the Binghams on last week for our one of our grower interviews, And it was a delight to have both Marissa and Cliff on there. But, you know, delving a little deeper in here too. So we get some of the grapes from Bingham. And Bret, what was your first experience with the Binghams? And then can you lead us through that vineyard and your views? Because there are three different sections of that area that we deal with their vineyards.
Well, and I think that I as far as the story with Becker Vineyards and the Bingham as the grower has gone back a very long time. Originally the Viognier and, you know, different varieties that we picked up from them. And, you know, they're primarily a white grape grower that we pick up as far as for our white wines program. And we dabbled a little bit into picking up Cab Franc, and that's the one that we tried last Friday that was so amazing. And then we started asking more growers to plant certain things. But historically what has happened in this growing from the grower standpoint is that they produce a great wine that's from a region of the world. And then we kind of talk a little bit about it. We were like, originally it was Viognier. And so, you know, Roussanne and Viognier are very similar in where they're grown in the world. And, you know, do you want to plant a little bit of Roussanne? And so I think that the first thing was about 5 acres or 5 tons of Roussanne. And then it very quickly became 60 or 70 or 80 tons of Roussanne between all of our growers. And again, I think Roussanne specifically, this is the main, what you said it was 70% in this, right?
Right.
So Roussanne, you know, by itself is a kind of a obscure varietal that if we put Roussanne in a bottle and call it Roussanne, it's something that we all love, but it may be harder to sell. And as we've gone with these different blocks, that's kind of been the evolution of these different blocks from different vineyards. And really and truly our goal from the winery standpoint is to not hinder what a grower wants to do or what they can grow, but we also still have to sell it. And that's kind of how these different varieties have come about, I guess. You know, the other component of this is the farmhouse vineyard. So between those two, Viognier and Roussanne are very important in our programs that we get from both of them, you know?
Yeah, and you know, the thing that I really enjoy about the Bingham Roussanne, it's funny you mentioned the Cab Franc, because that Roussanne block is right next to that Cab Franc block in the vineyard. It's just a few.
And that's at the old place, you know. Right. So they call the original planting the old place, and it's up on a little bit higher hill. And again, if you're driving out there, it's hard to see a hill in Lubbock, but there are hills and valleys and playa lakes, and they try to put, you know, the new plantings that have happened over the last 5 to 6 years are different than the ones that happened 10 or 15 years ago when most of our growers put their grapes in. They started figuring out real quick that putting, you know, grapes up on a higher little knoll might mean a 5-degree difference in temperature, so you're not losing the fruit if it freezes, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to real quick do a shout out. I just noticed somebody from the Netherlands has joined us and is missing their Texas wine. So, you know, just as a side, you can get really good gin in the Netherlands, just so you know. So, well, you know, not to marginalize all the others, I'm going to concentrate just a little bit more on this Roussanne, because as you mentioned before, we do put it in a bottle. We do a Roussanne, classically labeled as a Roussanne, and it is an obscure varietal for a lot of people. But it is the backbone here, that honeycomb note that I keep getting out of here. And the Binghams, I love the Old Place vineyard a lot, both for the Cab Franc and the Roussanne. We also get a little bit of Viognier from there. So it is, I don't know what it is about the soil right there. I mean, when you drive by it does not at first look like it would be very grape friendly, but then you see that vineyard and everything does so very well there. Then you head back over to the winery or the farm building area where we get more of the Viognier from. And it's not, what is it, a mile away, 1.5 miles apart. And
it's got a real fancy name. It's called the Barn because it's next.
Yeah.
Jon, this is liquid honeysuckle. Is what it's honey, but honeysuckle is what it really is, and that's a beautiful capture.
Right. I'm watching the comments roll up here. I just saw Joe Becker sign on. I'm waiting for the next smart house. But let's drop. Okay, so and somebody also asked about the percentages, and I'm sorry guys, I'm gonna have to look at my cheat sheet here. The Roussanne, like we said before, is 70% of the blend. I don't think I have the exact percentages down here. I just remember that from from there. I know that the Sauvignon Blanc is only like 1%. I mean, of the rest of the varietals, of course, the Roussanne is dominant, but then we have the Chardonnay, the Semillon, and then we have a little bit of Sauvignon Blanc in there.
There's 5% Viognier too.
Yeah, and 5% Viognier. So why don't we jump over, Bret, to the farmhouse vineyard and discuss that, because they're, for a long time we were dealing with them under the Bingham Vineyard, and Nick Seaton, who is the nephew of Cliff, and of course, and it's Nick and Anthony and their wives who are the growers for the farmhouse vineyard. But the Viognier that we get from farmhouse is extraordinarily important for a lot of different programs. But in this one, even though it's a small percentage, I really like the body that it offers to this wine.
Well, I think it's interesting how we can take the same grapes from the same vineyards and take one and make it a dry wine that's barrel aged to make the Viognier and the Roussanne that we make. And then really and truly, until it goes to the barrel program, it stays on the same path. And that's what we're tasting here. And so I do think that you're getting all those notes. And I want to make another point. If we made this wine out of Muscat Canelli, it would taste completely different. It would have a huge boom of pink grapefruit. And that's not what we've had here. And so, understand the differences of wine when they're tasting. I think a lot of people that are getting into wine they don't understand that it's the difference between the flavor profile of Roussanne and Muscat is as different as a green apple versus a grapefruit,
right?
Or apricot or whatever we're tasting. So, those different flavors that are coming out are not just because of, it's also because of where they're grown. But back to the farmhouse versus the Bingham vineyards, they're not very far away from each other. If you go to different regions of the world, they're talking about the top of the hill or the top of the mountain where the slope, that it can change 30 or 40 degrees on the side of the hill that they're grown on. These are not in that climate. They're in different locations. But, the crazy thing is Bobby Cox used to take me around, and I mentioned that like 5 times, I think, every time I'm on here. Back in the days when, I'd get in the truck with him and spend 3 days driving around. He goes, well, you see this hill? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's not a hill.
No, exactly it, right? What hill, Bobby?
but that little hill makes a big difference. And again, the soil types make a big difference, how much water they have. Out there, there's an abundance of water for the most part. A lot of the reasons why the growers in Lubbock started planting grapes was because of the aquifer and their concerns about how much water they were using on the other crops. And grapes use such a small percentage of what the other big crops use out there that's kind of what, made that happen to a certain extent. But the bottom line is I think that we have growers in the state of Texas that are world-class, period. You don't have to say that they're great growers in Texas. That's not what we're talking about. And we've had these weeks of double gold wines and, all the things that we've done. Well, that comes from the vineyard. And I think that, we always say, well, this is a great grape for Texas. Well, it's really not. It's a great wine that's made from grapes from Texas that can compete with wines of the world. And that's, I think, what we're trying to do.
Oh, I agree. And I think we have done that. And in addition to the vineyards, hey, Doc, could you not listen to the next few minutes? Because we're actually going to say some complimentary things about you. But honestly, it does go back, and certainly well before I joined the team, but it goes back to Doc and of course yours, footwork out there, sifting through those vineyards, giving contracts to those guys who are coming on, and Doc did a lot early on to support that. And we're reaping that investment now, and it really is about partnership. And I think that's probably, without being too bloviated or anything, that's probably one of the most important things learning about making wine is the relationship between winery and vineyard. And we're very, very lucky for that. But we don't need to say this is a great Texas wine. We can say it's a great wine by any standard anywhere, and eventually we'll get out of that. Not that we're embarrassed to be from Texas or that I am. It's just that I want this on a national and world level, that this is a great wine region, and there's no reason to otherwise. I mean, we have all these great varietals.
Many people don't realize the risk that the grower takes to let the wine be as fully developed and ripe as he or she can. And, if they wait another week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks and they have a hailstorm, then all that all that work in that vineyard for a year is lost.
Right.
And it takes courage and commitment.
Well, and it also, when you're looking at a grower right in their eyes and they're giving you the look like, okay, buddy, I'll wait until week, but I'll tell you right now, if something happens, I know where you live. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can see that in some of these guys' eyes.
And I do think that that's what separates. I mean, we're to the point where from the grower standpoint and the wines and the grapes are available in the state. It's to the point where I'm going to make a T-shirt, that we sell that says at some point quality is going to matter, because 10 years ago we would take every grape we could get because that was the only ones we could scramble to grab.
Right.
And really and truly the growers that we contract with, they understand our program. They come and they understand that we are not going to, take something that they made and not put the full effort to make it great, regardless if it's a sweet, sweeter Roussanne like this is, or the signature wines that we're making. And really and truly, I told this story a couple weeks ago about, Miss Canada and how I would go out and look for growers. For the most part, they're coming to us asking, what do you need? What do you need? And the bottom line is, well, we need what we can sell. And also make into this world-class wine that we're trying to make. And I do think that that's kind of been the basis. And I've kind of obviously had a little bit of influence by Dr. Becker, waiting on how ripe stuff gets. So one of the other interesting things about Roussanne and Viognier is that if you ever get a chance to go into a Roussanne or Viognier vineyard, you almost don't even have to grab it and taste it to see how sweet it is. It gets this really cool garnet kind of color on the outside of these stems or the berries are kind of greenish, yellow, and until it kind of turns that kind of garnet hue, there's no reason to even think about picking it, and that's where the flavor development comes from. If we picked it too early, it would taste, way green and weird, and that's really where this flavor's coming out of that Doc is calling this nice honeysuckle and maybe apricot or tropical fruit notes.
Yeah, and so that also at home. So this is residually sweet. We did not add sugar to this. We shut fermentation down on a blend of this wine and left the residual sugar unfermented. So all the sugar, and people quite frequently ask about how sweet is a wine grape. Everybody is familiar with the table grape. We know they're sweet. And they're like, well, is a wine grape, because we like dry wines, we're like, oh, well, maybe a wine grape's not sweet. A wine grape is over 2 times sweeter than a table grape. When you eat a wine grape, it's almost like candy in your mouth when you bite into a very ripe wine grape. So it's very easy to make a sweet wine. You just shut the fermentation down with a little chilling and a little, hope and a prayer kind of thing that actually stops. Yeast is very sensitive until you want to stop the fermentation. Then it doesn't. When you want it to go, it stops like if you blink wrong. But the second you want to stop the fermentation, it's like, hey, buddy, nuh-uh. Doc, Bret alluded to earlier our discussions on sweet or dry wines at the winery. You want to elaborate on that, or can I tell a story?
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to totally make shit up. But one of the things we do talk about, like with this, because Doc, you are a classic dry wine person, and most people are. But there is a niche for a sweet wine, and it fills a very good niche. Right now, this wine is doing exactly what it should do. We're having a great conversation, and we're sipping this wine. And yes, we need to talk about the wine, but this wine is lending itself to just a good conversation, a nice, toddy time or cocktail hour conversation. But at the winery on Saturdays, when we're starting to make sweet wines, the look that I get from Dr. Becker is a combination between, I think you need to leave town now, and why did I hire you again? So, but honestly, what is your opinion of this wine? As I know it's a sweet wine, but
I love the aromatic character, and I think it's wonderful for exactly what it is, as you've said. And you have in barrel right now, John, a Madeira from 2012, which is amazing. And you also have some incredible port coming. And I did find it, yes. and, with the thief and some glasses. It was wonderful. I recommend it. But I like sweet wine. I think that for me, the holy grail is to try to make the great dry white and red wines. But this is a delight. I'm glad people like it.
It is a little easier to make a sweet wine. Yes. I mean, you get to, there's, shall we say, the sugar can cover a whole host of issues. But to make a white sweet wine that lasts, this is a 2016 vintage. It is now 2020. You know, the sugar will help preserve, and so does the alcohol, but it's only 12% alcohol. You know, it's 4% residual sugar, 12% alcohol. So it's just borderline classic late harvest wine. But
John, if you would have let that fermentation go on, it would have made 14.6, 14.8. That's the other thing.
Right.
And that's where the delineation, where a lot of people don't understand, is if you stop the fermentation, you're going to keep the alcohol a little bit lower, but that's where the residual sugar actually comes from.
Right, exactly. And, you know, and to a certain extent, we do that on our drier wines too. There's a point in time where we're like, okay, we're going to stop it here with 2 or 3 grams. So to help people at home, and I always take this for granted, and I apologize to you guys, it's just one of those things when you work in a certain industry or a certain area, you get used to the lingo, or you get used to the common language of that industry. So one of the common pieces of information is grams per liter. So we measure sugar in grams per liter. We do use metric. Trust me, I'm the worst person about math. All you have to do is ask my wife. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't spend as much on booze as you do at groceries every week? So, but grams per liter, it translate directly to percent. So 40 grams per liter sounds like a lot, but that's only 4% residual sugar. So 10 grams per liter equals 1% residual sugar. Human threshold for tasting sweet is at 0.5% or 5 grams per sugar, generally speaking. Most wines are under 5 grams that are dry. There's still residual sugar there, but it's below threshold of tasting sweet. What sugar does at that low level is offer body, that middle palate. Sugar at a little higher level at 0.5 to 0.7% or 5 to 7 grams, or what we start to call classically off dry. Half the people that taste it won't taste sweet. The other half will taste mildly sweet, but it offers more aromatic, more preservation, and more body. The sugar certainly feels weighted in your mouth, but it's going to taste sweet at 4%. I mean, to give a good example, Coca-Cola or a Pepsi is generally about 12 to 15% residual sugar, and this is 4%. So that'll give you a little purview of what residual sugar is on there. So
John also love that this is the natural grape sugar from these various varieties, and that's fun to taste.
There's six normal sugars in wine, 3 of which are fully fermentable. 1 is partially fermentable. The other 2 are unfermentable. So we won't go into that because I don't want people falling asleep on their computers while they're drinking their wine. But the classic glucose and fructose is what we normally deal with when we're talking sweet. So this has quite a bit left. It is all from the grape. We don't like to add a lot of things to the wine. We like to deal with what's just grapes. Yes, we will filter the wine. This has been filtered. You know, that's a whole nother argument and conversation. But, you know, we also need to discuss the Sauvignon Blanc that's in here. So that comes from our vineyard in Stonewall, Texas. Now, granted, it's just a small amount, but that Sauvignon Blanc offers that underpinning of apple in here. And I'm going to attribute it to that just from smelling and knowing that the Sauvignon Blanc is in there. So all these great white wines, and that was probably my biggest thing about moving to Texas and discovering the wines of Texas as a winemaker, was understanding that, yes, it's hot, yes, it's humid, but these varietals do so well here. And that,
yeah.
And Viognier, Doc, you were the first one to plant it. Then Sauvignon Blanc. Why did you plant Sauvignon Blanc in the front vineyard?
I love Sauvignon Blanc, and it's been I tasted some really wonderful Sauvignon Blancs produced in Texas, you know, a decade before we started, and so that was part of the inspiration. And those vines are still there, planted in '93, and you've made some wonderful Sauvignon Blanc from them in the last few years.
Yeah, we have. We've been very, very fortunate with the wines that come off of that. So Bret, I I have a little card here in front of me, and I want to ask you guys this question, okay? And I want to get both your answers before I give you the answer that's on this card. I have this great wine trivia game, and I'm just going to ask you this question. Which vegetable is considered wine unfriendly? Artichoke, tomato, or parsnip?
Tomato.
Yeah,
Bret?
I would say tomato.
Okay, well, it's actually artichoke.
Really?
Yeah.
Thanks,
So,
Jon.
artichoke, many people are sensitive to artichoke, and there's a portion of that artichoke that they're sensitive to, and I can't remember what the enzyme is, but it makes it taste either sweet or metallic when it's blended with wine. So artichoke.
Now, so, you know, one of my friends is the artichoke expert at Texas A&M,
Mhm.
and he planted an artichoke field. He did it with Brett and Chris, and I had some involvement. And they were wonderful. The problem is that the deer got in and ate the artichokes.
Oh.
And so Buddy wanted to we were going to have an artichoke festival, and she said, let's have an Axis Deer Festival. We're gonna eat the deer that ate my artichokes. But then Chris recognized how beautiful the flowers were, and we began to, instead of selling artichokes, selling artichoke flowers, and they're incredible blossom.
Right. That would have been great. Venison and wine. That would have been great.
Well, and I do think that story alludes to like what the perils of the farmer kind of are, regardless of what you're farming. Like it doesn't really matter, growing cotton or corn or peanuts or artichokes. The first year that we planted those, they got eaten by all the deer. Next year we put a fence up, and then they had a bug that got into them and infested them. And then the next year we had all that covered, and then we had a ton of artichokes and nowhere to put them. And so that's where Chris started drying them out, trying to sell. So we had 3 chances to sell the artichokes. One is a vegetable, one is a fresh flower, and then one is a dried flower. And we moved on from the artichoke business to something else, right?
We planted, if I remember correct, I remember that, and we ended up planting the Sauvignon or the Sangiovese.
Yeah, so the wine club block is there. So the other part of that is that, you know, when the wine club members have their block, that they have their sponsored vines, and they come out, their names on the plaque, and, you know, they're there, and 3 of their vines are dead. I said, well, you know, last year you lost 30% of your total income because they died for some reason. And they said, why did they die? And I'm like, well, there's a huge red ant mound right here. That's probably why they're dead. And so we've been able to give them a little spice of the life of a farmer. And the new Sauvignon Blanc that we planted up front got froze in the Thanksgiving freeze. And so some of the folks that sponsor that have, you know, when they walk out there and there's only 50% of them that woke up, welcome to the life of the farmer, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, one more trivia question, then we'll get into food pairings. But true or false? U.S. wineries exist in all 50 states.
True.
That's absolutely true, including Alaska.
Right.
So, you know, they don't. I don't think they grow grapes up there. As a matter of fact, I know they don't. But
and also, tomatoes was the right answer, John.
Tomato. I concur.
Wow. So you don't like a good Chianti with a nice pasta and marinara? I mean, really?
It's difficult. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a problem. You have to be Italian.
Really? Let's direct you to the map behind me. Okay, Bret, what food would you pair with this wine?
I'm going to cheat a little bit. It's going to be probably cheesecake.
Ooh, damn.
And I'm talking about plain cheesecake. Anybody that knows me, I don't like all the stuff on it, just straight in.
No, real cheesecake without all the good. Yeah, absolutely. Doc, what food would you pair with this wine?
I think any of the Asian food, Thai food, Chinese would be wonderful. Yeah.
I'm gonna lean there too, but I'm gonna say a Szechuan pepper pot, you know, where you boil the food, share it around, nice spicy stuff. I think this would go very, very well with spicy food. Of course, I talked earlier about sushi. I still think sushi would also go very well with this. So,
yes.
Well, guys, there's no finesse to the aging program on here. We'll wrap this up. I did not actually put any of this wine in barrel. This was all tank fermented and tank aged. So this went into bottle fairly quickly after the 2016 harvest. I think it was around mid-year on 2017 that we actually bottled this. So it's lasted very well, and it's a very nice sweet wine. This wine will last for quite some time too. So if you find yourself in need of a sweet bottle, think of us there. Also, guys, remember next Friday, this coming Friday, is our Culinaria pairing. I'm going to be making chocolate chip cookies for that. So you've got to join us for a little dessert and dry red wine. It's a great experience. And then next week we will be doing we will not be doing a tasting on Monday, but we'll be doing 2 bottles on Wednesday with Shane Smith and the Saints, wonderful local band.
John, I want to interrupt again right here because this, to me, this is going to be a very cool event. And
look how happy you are.
it is, and we've been this has been something we've been working on for 10 years. I put that on Facebook yesterday, but the idea behind this is a song swap between the artists that write their own music and a winemaker who's making their wine. And so it's called tasting notes for a reason. Okay. So the notes that you're making in your wine is going to accentuate that, and we're going to go back and forth between the winemaker and the artist. They're going to talk about why they wrote that song and what it was about and what made that whole thing come together. And then you're going to talk about what made the notes and the wine come together. And to me, this has been something that we've had a long time, and it's going to be super cool. That's all I got to say.
We're all looking forward to it. So yeah, if you guys go on our website, go ahead and click order on there. We're going to do 2 bottles in one night. It'll be a great Wednesday. It'll be a good excuse to call in sick to your home office the next day. So, but anyway, Doc, any final words of wisdom for us tonight?
No, Santé. And look forward to
cheers to everybody. Wish you good health and great wine. You all enjoy the night, and thank you for joining us.
You
Cheers.
too. Cheers.